Join KCRW today and you could take in all the wonders Iceland has to offer with a 4-day trip to Reykjavik and tickets to the Iceland Airwaves Music Festival. Visit kcrw.com/join, and thanks.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Politics of Culture. I'm Ruth Seymour, KCRW's General Manager. The Danish cartoons, the Pope's remarks about Islam, the cancellation of a Mozart opera, all speak of recent cultural conflicts between Islam and modern life. And today we're going to focus on religious tensions with 3 writers who've tackled the subject. Sam Harris, whose latest book is called Letter to a Christian Nation. Andrew Sullivan, his new book is The Conservative Soul, How We Lost It and How to Get It Back. And Jonathan Kirsch, who was on book tour with his most recent work, The History of the End of the World. I'd like to welcome you all, and I'd like to just add a note. I often find that when I have 3 compelling speakers, I can't get them to speak with each other until the very end of the program, which is really many times where the program should begin. So I'm going to begin by asking each one of you a different question, and then I really want you to feel free to engage with each other. So let me begin with you, Sam Harris, because it was your opinion piece in the Los Angeles Times that actually gave birth to this program and inspired it. And I want to read you something that you wrote and ask you to take it more deeply, to explain it to the audience. You say that in your first book, The End of Faith, you argue that the world's major religions, and this is the quote, are genuinely incompatible, inevitably cause conflict, and now prevent the emergence of a viable global civilization. And I gather when you said that, you mean the world's major religions, not just Islam, but, for example, Christianity and Judaism as well, with each other. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, I think we just have to acknowledge that we are living in a world in which millions of people can rationalize the violent deaths of their children by recourse to fairy tales, by recourse to ancient literature, which is every bit as literary as the Iliad and the Odyssey or the plays of Shakespeare. So if you can imagine living in a world in which people reliably kill one another in sectarian violence over rival interpretations of the plays of Shakespeare. You know, is Hamlet really the perfect word of God, or is it King Lear? I mean, that would be an impossibly bizarre world to live in. It's almost impossible to imagine we could get ourselves into that situation, and yet I think we are in exactly that situation on account of different books and claims to their divine providence. You know, but that we have 1.4 billion Muslims, a significant percentage of whom believe that the Quran is the perfect word of the creator of the universe, and by the light of that book and its commentarial tradition, think that death in defense of the faith is the best thing that can possibly happen to them. And this is not all Muslims, but we are definitely in conflict with Muslims who do believe this. And in our own society, we have Christians. By many polls, something like half of American Christians, something like 44%, think that Jesus is going to return in their lifetime and rapture them into the sky so that they can bear witness to the holy genocide that is going to inaugurate the end of human history. These are terrible ideas, and yet they are ascendant, and that's what I'm worried about.
And what about Judaism?
Well, Judaism is potentially very divisive, but there are so few Jews in the world, and so many of them have relaxed their adherence to their scripture such that Judaism has become a kind of cultural identity rather than a religion for many Jews. So you can say you're a practicing Jew without even believing in God, which is a bit of a non sequitur in Christianity and Islam. But that said, the Jewish settlers with their theological claims on certain real estate in the Middle East are potentially driving us to a cataclysm of sorts, and I think their theological notions of God being a perfect real estate broker have to be undermined and discredited, and they have to be pulled off that land at some point.
Okay, let me. By the way, these three questions are not necessarily related. And so let me just, without comment or asking our other guests to comment on it, let me turn to Andrew Sullivan. I want to ask you a question. I heard you speak about this on a cable television show, and I was very intrigued by it. You were trying to probe more deeply into the Pope's remarks, his recent remarks, his quotations about Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad, and Islam. And you raised several points that you felt needed to be taken seriously, and I wonder if you would speak to us about that.
Well, I think what the Pope was trying to express in explaining what he regards as a distinction between Christianity and Islam is that Christianity is a reasonable faith by which, and he refers to the beginning of St. John's Gospel. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And the Greek word there is logos. For Christians, we are asked to believe that Jesus is in some ways the incarnation of the divine, but also is a reasonable incarnation of the divine, and that as human beings we are able, indeed required, to use our reason to explore what our faith tells us and what it tells us about the world and what it tells us about how to live. And I think what he was arguing was that Greek origin of Christianity, which makes it amenable to reasonable discussion and debate, is utterly lacking in Islam. And therefore, there is a very difficult problem in communicating or even having a dialogue with Islam. Now, I think that that's an interesting point. I think it's a little rich coming from this Pope who has done more to suppress reasoned argument within and discourse within the Catholic Church than anybody in a very long time. But I do think I do disagree with Sam Harris, although I deeply enjoyed his book and respect his arguments, that all faith has to be equally irrational, and that we cannot have a more moderate form of religion that does not seek to murder or even to seek martyrdom for itself.
Okay, let me turn now to Jonathan Kirsch, who tackled the history of the end of the world. Armageddon, you want to talk about that? The roots of it in religion? Does it come out of Christianity? Isn't it also rooted in Judaism?
It certainly is. The apocalyptic idea, the idea that God has a master plan for the end of the world and the end of history, and that master plan envisions a final battle between good and evil, after which the known world, the historical world, will come to an end and some kind of paradise will take its place, begins in the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition in Judaism, specifically in the book of Daniel, and it's transmitted forward into Christianity in the book of Revelation, which is the book that my own book focuses on. And Sam has pointed out that if we speak bluntly about the theology of Christianity, its foundational prophecy was that the end was imminent. Jesus of Nazareth and Paul and the author of Revelation all believed that the world was going to end in their own lifetimes, before their own eyes, that the world would be destroyed and a new heaven, a new earth would be created. And that's an idea, as one of my sources puts it, that comes with some very dangerous baggage. David Koresh and the Branch Davidians are very recent examples of what happens when people read the book of Revelation too literally and take it upon themselves to hasten the end time. But obviously that's not the only example, not the only example in Christian history, which is full of such examples, nor in Judaism or Islam.
Sam, let me return to you, although I wonder, before I ask my next question, whether you take issue with any of the statements that you've heard.
I would just respond to Andrew in that it's not that I think all religious traditions or all religious doctrines are equally dangerous or present the same liabilities. In fact, one of the taboos I continually run up against in my writing and break with some pleasure is that it is taboo for us to notice that our religions actually don't teach the same thing, and where they do try to teach the same thing, they don't teach it equally well. And so I argue at some length that it really matters specifically what people believe, and Islam, for instance, presents some unique liabilities, both on the basis of its doctrine and on the basis that it has been sheltered from a confrontation with modernity and scientific progress and secular politics for the last few centuries, where Christianity has really been functionally edited by modernity. I mean, even our own fundamentalists cannot be as fundamentalist as Christians were in the 14th century, and that's a very good thing. The problem I have with religious moderation of the sort that I think Andrew would champion is that moderates tend not to be very candid about where their moderation is coming from. It's not like looking more closely at the Bible gives you all these reasons to be a moderate Christian or a moderate Catholic. This is coming from a confrontation with a larger conversation about secular ethics and seeing the consequences of certain behaviors in the world. And I view religion as a kind of constraint upon that conversation. And if I can just give you one specific example from Catholicism, I mean, we have a pope who is rumored to now be reconsidering the doctrine of the stigmatization of contraception, this idea that condom use is somehow morally problematic. At least he's reconsidering it among married couples where one partner has HIV. Now, this may seem like a very promising efflorescence of rationality from the Vatican, but this is coming on the basis of the spectacle of the horror of this doctrine in the world, where you have Catholic priests preaching the sinfulness of condom use in sub-Saharan Africa, where literally millions of people die each year from AIDS. And I mean, as I argue in my book, this is genocidal stupidity. I mean, we would not tolerate this from a secular organization.
But let me address that issue, because I think there are resources within religion, not just outside of it, that argue for moderation. And I mean, one of them I might quote again from St. John. St. Paul, that we now see through a glass darkly. But then we shall see face to face when we die and see God. The implication of that we now see through a glass darkly is that the human soul and mind, as it is on earth, is not able to fully understand all that God is, by definition. And therefore, within faithful Christianity, there is also, on its own rationale, a notion of humility and modesty with respect to religious claims, because of the fallenness of the human soul and the weakness of the human intellect, and that therefore it is perfectly religiously orthodox to say we should not be extremists, nor should we seek to impose our faith on others.
Well, it's religiously
and
orthodox
John Locke's
now.
letter on toleration, which is the great earliest statement of religious toleration, specifically cites Jesus and the Gospels as its inspiration, that Jesus was clearly not interested in seeking power to control others. And therefore, if we are to be true to him, we have to stop this fundamentalist mania and this claim to absolute certainty.
I have to just jump in for a second. By the way, in case you've just joined us, you're listening to The Politics of Culture on 89.9 KCRW Santa Monica and KCRW.com, and I'm Ruth Seymour, KCRW's General Manager, and we're discussing religion today with authors Sam Harris, Andrew Sullivan, and Jonathan Kirsch. One of the things that concerns me in the discussion as it has gone on so far is this attempt to seek reasonableness, if you will, words like humility or rationality. But is that really what faith is about?
Well, if I may project into this argument, there's certainly a core value to monotheism, which it can be and has been very dangerous because it promotes exclusivism. And whenever someone embraces the idea of exclusivism, that I possess the divine truth and you do not, and if you fail to see it, you're making not only an error but committing a crime, that's deeply woven into all three monotheisms. But we mustn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. It's also true that these scriptures, especially in Judaism and Christianity, are incredibly diverse. They have very a wide range of values, a wide range of ideas about God and about what God demands of us. And as long as we're quoting Gospels, let's quote Gospel of Matthew, which is portions of which are known as the Little Apocalypse. These are an alternate, a counter-apocalypse to the book of Revelation, in which Jesus is shown to advocate feeding the hungry and clothing the naked and visiting the sick and the imprisoned as the proper way of showing worship of him as a Godhead. That's the kind of Christianity, for instance, that motivates a man like Jimmy Carter, a born-again Christian like all of our recent presidents, to go out and hammer nails for Habitat for Humanity. And I would argue that that's an entirely positive value, positive social value, that's encouraged by a deep conviction to Christianity. It is not always or necessarily divisive.
The same could be said of the civil rights movement, which was fundamentally, I think, a religious movement, not a political one. In other words, I think that Sam's rejection of all religious experience is necessarily fundamentalist and intolerant.
Well, no, I haven't done that.
Okay.
I mean, you got to be very clear on that, because I'm very interested in ethics and in spiritual experience. I mean, I myself have spent something like 2 years on silent meditation retreats where I do nothing but meditate for 18 hours a day, seeking very specific experiences that in a Buddhist context, although I do it without assimilating the rather Baroque religiosity of Buddhism. But I'm very interested in spiritual experience, and I think ethical life is absolutely essential to us. But it precedes religion, and we all have ethical intuitions that we exercise, and really it's that we use them in order to cherry pick these very ragged documents that we take as scripture.
Jesus was a religious figure or a spiritual figure?
Jesus may have been a spiritual figure, but I think this idea that it is legitimate to be part of a tradition that hews narrowly to him and to this one book, to the exclusion of all other books, as though this one book may in fact have emanated from some omniscient source, that lends tacit legitimacy to the religious divisions in our world. That is what perpetuates this idea, generation after generation, that it is legitimate to raise children to believe that there's important differences between them and other people on the basis of religion. And I think we have to fundamentally transcend that paradigm. We have to be human beings first, interested in a modern dialogue about the possibilities of human happiness, and we can do that. We can figure out better reasons to build houses for the poor than the belief that Jesus was the Son of God and may be returning to earth. I mean, religion gives good people bad reasons to be good, where good reasons are actually available.
Well, before we continue this discussion, I want to turn the focus back to Islam. We're confronted today with a series of events, some of them very physical events, like the terrorists, like the Taliban, some of them cultural events, like the cancellation of a Mozart opera, that are or the Danish cartoons that are confounding to Western society or to modern man. I want you to take up that issue, Islam, in light of this discussion that we've been having. You know, at the end of the day, what you've pointed out is that every religion has its pitfalls. Every religion has its lack of rationality, its embracing of the irrational, if you will, for some ends. So how do we deal now with Islam and the kind of free thinking and even I guess, what would you say, the kind of thinking that inspires the reaction to the Danish cartoons?
I'd like to point out that we mustn't overcredit religion per se, or Islam in particular, as the source of these frictions and dangers, because in many instances I think these are the conduits through which other forces are flowing, and certainly what we're seeing here is a clash of civilization, a geopolitical struggle, a cultural struggle that is expressed in the language of religion, but does not necessarily flow from religion. I always like to point out that the emblematic symbol of the Taliban when they were in power in Afghanistan was that their checkpoints were draped in audio tape. Audio tape was unspooled from audio cassettes and video cassettes, which represented to them the corrupting influence of Western popular culture. Now, they might have expressed that as a religious idea, but I think we can also understand that a great deal of resentment and political hostility went into the same emotion, and it took on the language of Islamic fundamentalism.
I
was
have
not
to say,
exclusively that.
I think that is wishful thinking at its most extreme.
I'm afraid I'm going to line up with Andrew on this one. Go ahead, Andrew.
I think we do both agree on this. I mean, you only have to read.
Why do you feel that there's something actually, I tend to be more sympathetic to Jonathan's point of view. Why wouldn't this be a manipulation?
I take them at their word. And they're very, very clear. I mean, Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda,
that may be
Taliban
a mistake.
are very clear that their entire motivation is Islamic. And
that may be true. That may be true of Osama bin Laden, but I just today at lunch I used the following example. If you're in a room with 100 people, selected at random, and 3 of them are standing at one side of the room brandishing swords saying, "I believe thus and such, and anyone in this room who doesn't believe it, I'm going to cut their head off." Well, 97 other people are not likely to speak out. I think history shows that Islamic civilization and Islamic culture is capable of tolerance and is not necessarily its worst extreme.
I think there's other data to be brought to bear here that will shore up Andrew's position on this. I think that when you have the spectacle of well-educated, middle-class or even aristocratic people who have not personally suffered much humiliation or oppression, and who have not shown themselves to be political in their preoccupations, but have spent day after day at a mosque talking about the pleasures that await infidels or the horrors that await infidels in the next life and the pleasures that await martyrs. And then you find these people, engineers and architects and other types, flying planes into buildings. You have almost a scientific experiment. I mean, these people are telling us over and over again what they believe, why they are doing what they're doing, and insofar as humiliation, other psychological states like humiliation are operative, they are often theological humiliations. I mean, we're talking about people who think they have the perfect word of the creator of the universe, and they expect ascendancy in this life. Muhammad was the Caesar of Islam. He was not a hippie who got crucified. They're expecting victory in this life, and this is not all Muslims, but we are at war with some subset of the Muslim world who really thinks they are going to restore the caliphate.
But isn't that really proof of what Jonathan is saying? To expect victory in this life, is that really stem out of the religious impulse?
Well, it does, because you look at the articulation of just the notion of martyrdom and jihad. I mean, just look at the fact that in the West Bank and Gaza, we do not have Palestinian Christian suicide bombers who suffer they speak the same language, they're the same people, they have to go through the same humiliating checkpoints. This is practically a science experiment. You give them slightly different religious beliefs, and you have an inexhaustible supply of suicide bombers on the other side.
Now, it remains true, I think, at the same time, that obviously Christianity in the past has also been capable of producing the most astonishing violence. And in fact, I think it was a greater reach to turn a peacenik, pacifist hippies doctrines into holy war than it was to take
it's harder.
the Quran, which has plenty of instigations to violence within it.
And perhaps, to be fair, we could acknowledge that there are no books more intolerant and really sadistic in their specified cruelty than the early books of the Hebrew Bible, books like Leviticus and Deuteronomy and Exodus and 2 Samuel.
I just have to say, speaking as a Jewish person, this is as if you had pointed to Meir Kahane or Baruch Goldberg, this lunatic physician who opened fire on a mosque, and said, well, look, this is what Judaism represents, because here are these brutal, fanatical Jews.
It's not that exceptional. I mean, to say that Osama bin Laden is a fringe figure in the Muslim world like David Koresh is to make a mockery of words. I mean, he is far less fringe than that. He has a massive constituency that we really need to worry about, and we are doing him endless favors, no doubt. We have a president who has alienated every intelligent ally we have, and who himself talks rather uncritically about God. And we have problems on our own side. We have blundered into Iraq and made a catastrophe of that. Yes, yes, yes. But we have enemies we have not made, and we have made enemies based on their theology and their lunatic claims to want to kill cartoonists for caricaturing their prophet. I mean, we can't accommodate that level of medieval literalism, and we have to be honest about it.
Okay, let me just clarify this. What I think I hear you saying, both Sam and Andrew, is that there's something intrinsic in Islam that's incompatible, in the religion itself, that's incompatible with modern life.
The question is, has Islam had a reformation, an internal reformation, on the same lines as Christianity or indeed even Judaism within its interaction with modernity? And the answer is no. The second question is, does Islam have within it the resources, the reasonable, rational resources to construct such a reformation? And that is an open question, I think. I think that from my own study of it, it is a lot harder to find the oxygen and space within the Muslim world and the Muslim universe to criticize and engage in an open dialogue about religious truth, given the absolute commandment to submit at all times to the will of Allah.
And also given Jonathan's point that anyone who takes that stand
will be murdered.
It will be murdered in almost any Muslim community on this planet.
Well, the fact that apostasy is still a capital crime in most Muslim countries. In other words, if you actually decide in your conscience that you actually want to be a Christian or an atheist or an agnostic rather than a Muslim, you will be killed. Now, that means that what space is there for there to be an internal reform if the very process of dialogue it results in being murdered?
But let me say that there were periods in Christian history when the same fate awaited any Christian who dissented, and all we can hope for, I think I heard Sam allow that it's a possibility, is that Islam has not yet had its reformation, but may yet have.
The question Sam raises, and it's a really good one, is given where the technological level of destruction we're now capable of, will Islam reform in time before this world is blown up? And I think that is the deepest question here. I mean, Islam is a relatively young religion in comparison to Judaism and Christianity. But do we have 600 years to wait, given that the modern world has thrown up technologies capable in the wrong hands of killing millions, if not billions, of people? And that's the question.
I think we have to end with the question that you just posed.
That is the right question.
Yes, we all agree on that.
At least we end with a question, which is a consolation, since we don't assume that we have solved anything, except had a rather vibrant half hour of ideas. I'd like to thank my guests, Sam Harris, Andrew Sullivan, and Jonathan Kurtz, for joining us today. Sam Harris's latest book is Letter to a Christian Nation. Andrew Sullivan's newest is The Conservative Soul, and Jonathan Kirsch's most recent book is The History of the End of the World. And KCRW subscribers, don't forget, you can use your Fringe Benefits discount card at any of our many participating bookstores. And the producer of this program is Sarah Spitz. The technical director is Mike Newport. I'm Ruth Seymour, and thanks for listening. And next week, you'll hear Terrence McNally in conversation with KCRW's own Ariana Huffington about her new book on the politics of culture on 89.